Okay, so in this chapter, we are talking about saving, investment, and the financial system. And in the previous couple of videos, we saw financial markets and financial intermediaries. We talked about the bond market, the stock market, banks, and mutual funds. And in this video, I'm going to talk about savings and investment in national income accounts. I'm going to start with our first identity, and we call this national identity. And we saw this in one of the previous chapters, that the total income of any country, it can be decomposed into four components: consumption component, investment component, government purchases, and net exports. And this net export component, it is the difference between exports and imports of a country. So essentially, the total income of the country, it could be either spent by the households in consuming. If they are not consuming, they may be saving it, and that saving is translated into investment. And then governments are also making purchases in the country, so that will also considered as a part of total income. And then we have net exports, which means foreigners are buying our goods, and these are our exports. And similarly, we in the US, we are importing many goods from other countries. We are consuming those imported goods, and those two components are merged here in the net exports component. To start, we're going to assume that it's a closed economy, which means it doesn't have any relationship with the rest of the world, which is kind of a weird assumption, but we're going to assume that the country is isolated, which means we are not exporting anything to other countries, and other countries are not exporting to us, which means our imports are zero, our exports are zero, so net exports is zero. If this is the case, we can represent our previous identity as y equals c plus e plus g, which means we can bring this I component on the left hand side, which means investment, it is equal to our total income, whatever we produced, minus our private household consumption, minus the government purchases. So it seems like the total income, it could be either consumed by private household, or it is used to purchase government goods and services. And everything which is left over, that will be our investment. We know that in the country, investment has to be equal to savings. It follows that savings equals investment in a closed economy. So we can further simplify this equation into savings equals total income minus consumption minus government expenditures. So if assume that T is the total taxes in the country, we can add and subtract taxes from the previous equation. So we'll be left with savings equal y minus T minus C plus T minus G. So all we are doing here is like adding taxes here and then subtracting taxes here. And now this component y minus T minus C, this is the private savings. So why it is private saving? This is the total income, y. And then households pay taxes on this income. So that is the disposable income. Minus household also buy goods and services from other people and other firms. So anything that is left over after taxes and consumption, it is the saving, but it is the private saving. It is the saving by the private citizens. Similarly, this is the government part. So public savings is taxes minus government expenditures or government purchases. So governments, they raise taxes, that is the government income, taxes, minus whatever governments spend. So that is their expenditures. So look here closely. If the government revenue through taxes, it is greater than their expenditures, this term will be a positive number, which means government is generating more money through taxes than its spending, which means government is running a budget surplus. So budget surplus is whenever taxes are more than government expenditures. On the other hand, if the government is spending more money than the taxes, that is this G term or government expenditures are more than the government's income, which is through taxes, then this term will be a negative number and the government will be running a budget deficit. And this is what we see, that most of the countries of the world, they run a budget deficit rather than a budget surplus because they spend more than their income. Okay, so here's an example. In this example, we're going to talk about the previous identity that we saw, and we're going to find out public saving, net taxes, private saving, national saving, and investment. So here our Y or total income of the country is $10 trillion. Consumption is $6.5 trillion. That is the C part of the national identity. And then government spending, we know it is G, it is $2 trillion. And the government is running a budget deficit of $3 billion. So what is the private savings, public saving, taxes, and savings? So let's work out with this. So these are the numbers. So the government is running a budget deficit, which means expenditures are more than the taxes, and the amount is $300 billion. So we know public saving is minus 0.3. So see, government expenditures are, from this, government expenditures are $300 billion more than their tax revenue. So public saving is negative in this case. It's a negative number. The government is spending $300 billion more than their income, their taxes. So government is this saving. So public saving is minus $300 billion. And then net taxes, we can calculate taxes. That is government expenditures minus budget deficit. So we know the budget deficit is $300 billion and government expenditures are $2 trillion, which means net taxes are $1.7 trillion. In the next part, we can easily calculate private saving and national savings. We know private savings is total income minus taxes minus consumption. We know income is $10 trillion and taxes are $1.7 trillion and consumption is $6.5 trillion. So this will give us private savings equal $1.8 trillion. And national savings, that is the total saving in the country. We can get this number in two ways. So national saving has to be equal to public savings plus private savings. So private savings is $1.8 trillion and the public saving is minus $0.3 trillion. Net national saving is $1.5 trillion. Or we can use the identity that we saw earlier, income minus consumption by the private citizens minus government expenditures, and we'll get the same number, $1.5 trillion. Investment, we saw that investment has to be equal to the national savings, and we know national saving is $1.5 trillion, so investment is $1.5 trillion as well. So that's how you use national identity and this accounting method to calculate these numbers. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.